Different Protestant denominations were really allowed to flourish here in the U.S. because of the individualism that was prized by the pioneers of this country. They wanted to be able to worship how they saw fit. If we look at the distribution of various branches of Christianity in the Protestant denominations, we see some very distinct regional patterns across our country. So this map shows the leading church bodies within each county across the country. There's obviously going to be a lot of diversity within each county, but as far as what branch or denomination is dominant, this is the pattern that we see. This figure is very similar to figure 5.8 that's in your textbook. It just uses a different color scheme, which I think shows up a little bit better on screen, which is why I use it instead of the one from your textbook. But it shows exactly the same information as that map in your book. So you see Roman Catholics in blue on the map have the strongest presence in the northeast part of the country, as well as the west in general. And this is largely the product of migration to the U.S. from European countries in New England and Latin American countries to the southwest, both places where Catholicism is very dominant. Baptists in red, very dominant in the south. This is where we get the Bible Belt as a perceptual region. Mormonism in brown over here, again, dominant in Utah and some of the surrounding areas. Lutherans in yellow up here, the north central part of the country. This is often referred to as the Lutheran Belt. And sort of to explain that pattern of Lutheranism in the U.S., Martin Luther, who was one of the primary reformers of the church, he was a German priest, and Lutheranism was named after him. Lutheranism is the dominant religion in Germany. About half of that country's Christian population is Lutheran. And if you think back to where the majority of the German speakers are located from the last chapter, this pattern matches up quite well with that pattern of language as well. On the map, the counties with the black dots in them are counties where the leading church body claims at least 50% of the population. So that's where it's in the majority. Of the roughly 315 million people here in the U.S., about 78% identify themselves as Christian. So the vast majority of them are Christian. And of those, the majority are Protestant, about 51%. With Catholics coming in second at 24%. Remember that on a global scale, if you're looking at the worldwide population, Roman Catholics outnumber Protestants. 54% of the world's Christians are Catholic and only 22% are Protestant. But here in the U.S., it's exactly the opposite. Protestants outnumber Catholics within our country. The largest Protestant denomination is Baptist, more specifically Southern Baptist. In terms of churches overall in the U.S., if we look at it by denominations, the 5 largest churches in terms of members in 2012 were the Catholic Church with about 68 million members, Southern Baptist about 16 million, Methodist 8 million, the LDS Church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is the Mormon Church, 6 million people, and then the Church of God 5 million. Now we will move on and look at Islam. Islam is the second largest religion in the world, with approximately 1.6 billion followers. And adherents of Islam are called Muslims, and it is the last of the 3 Abrahamic religions. And again, if you think back to the map of the world religions, Islam is dominant in North Africa and parts of Asia, also in the Middle East, and throughout much of Indonesia. It is the fastest growing religion in the world. This is mainly due to high birth rates in places where it's practiced. In 1990, there were just over 1 billion adherents. Now there are over 1.6 billion. And as a religion, it's expected to grow quite rapidly because, again, the areas where it's prominent are the areas where we're seeing the greatest population growth overall, if you think back to what we learned in Chapter 3. It is also a monotheistic religion, but unlike Christianity, Muslims believe that God is not a trinity, but a singular entity. And the Arabic word for God is Allah. They do recognize Jesus as a prophet of God, along with Adam, Noah, Moses, and Abraham. But Jesus is not revered as a divine figure in Islam like he is in Christianity. In Islam, the final prophet sent by God to convey his divine messages to the world was Muhammad. And he was the last of the prophets and the messenger of God, and therefore is considered to be the founder of Islam. Muhammad was born in Mecca, which is a city in modern-day Saudi Arabia. He was born in the year 570, and he died in 632. He received his first revelation from God through the angel Gabriel at the age of 40. And he wrote these messages in the Quran, which is the Muslim holy book, which is believed to be the direct word of God that Muhammad received through Gabriel. Now, central to the practice of Islam are the 5 pillars. These form the core of Islamic beliefs as stated in the Quran. They are listed on page 134 of your textbook, so I haven't put them on the slide here. So be sure that you look at that page very carefully. You will be expected to know these for the test. You don't have to know the Arabic names for the different pillars, but you should be able to describe them or list them at least. So the 5 pillars are: number 1, they must make a profession of faith that includes a belief in Allah and a belief that Muhammad is the messenger and prophet of God. The second pillar is prayer 5 times a day. These ritual prayers are conducted at very specific times throughout the day, near dawn, afternoon, in the late afternoon, at sunset, and after nightfall. The third pillar is fasting, or not partaking in food or drink, from dawn until dusk during Ramadan, which is the Muslim holy month. Fasting is intended to teach one about patience, humility, and spirituality during this holy time. The fourth pillar is giving alms to the poor, or practicing acts of charity. This is viewed as a religious obligation that each Muslim who is able to should give some of their wealth to help the poor and the needy. And then the fifth pillar is that they are instructed to make at least one pilgrimage to Mecca during their lifetime. And again, Mecca is in Saudi Arabia. It's the site of Muhammad's birth and the holiest city in the Islamic world. And we're going to come back and talk about this particular pilgrimage a little bit later in the chapter. You have 2 main branches of Islam, Sunni and Shia. The majority of Muslims are Sunni, about 80%, and they are much more widespread throughout the world. Sunni Muslims are found throughout the Middle East, Northern Africa, and Indonesia. Only about 15% of Muslims are Shiites, and they are much more concentrated, mostly found in Iran and the eastern part of Iraq. And the main differences between the 2 branches go back to the earliest days of Islam and reflect disagreement over the line of succession in Islamic leadership after the death of Muhammad. He had no surviving sons. He had no followers of comparable leadership ability. So there's debate between the 2 groups as to who should have succeeded him, which is why they broke into 2 different factions. So here we see a map of the distribution of Muslims in the United States. Currently there are about 2.5 million Muslims here in the U.S. They make up less than 1% of the population. There are Muslims located in all 50 states throughout the U.S., but they are highly concentrated in 6 states: Michigan, California, Texas, Illinois, New York, and New Jersey. And they're mostly concentrated, again, just like Judaism, in larger cities. So Washington, D.C., Detroit, Michigan, Toledo, Ohio, Atlanta, Georgia, larger cities. Here in Oklahoma, you'll notice that Payne County, where Stillwater is, has a higher concentration of Muslims than either Oklahoma City or Tulsa. And that's due to the number of Muslim students we have studying at OSU. So again, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all closely related to one another as Abrahamic faiths, with Judaism being the parent religion for both Christianity and Islam. So now we're going to turn and look at another set of closely related religions, Hinduism and Buddhism.